We provide our assistance. We provide our assistance under contract with the Nevada Division of Environmental Protection. So that's one of the things that I think is really great about this national program, because some programs are based entirely within environmental regulatory agencies. Some are based in state departments of commerce. Some are in economic development groups. Some are affiliated with universities. Some are affiliated with small business development centers. And that's sort of the beauty of our national network, is that, you know, each state can set up their program in the way that makes the best sense for their individual state, as well as their individual small business community. So, you know, for me personally, being in Nevada, it's actually my second stop working with the SBEAP national network. Previously was in Pennsylvania at the University of Pennsylvania, where we similarly provided the technical assistance piece of the SBEAP in Pennsylvania, you know, under contract with the Department of Environmental Protection there in Pennsylvania. So, you know, my experience in the long time that I've been engaged with this national network is that, you know, it's a really a great group of people, and everybody's very dedicated to the small businesses that they work with. And also everybody that I've run across has been super committed to each other, you know, whether it's other states or our partners at US EPA. Everyone's really dedicated to helping each other succeed in the assistance that we're trying to provide to the small business community. And, you know, people share tools for assisting the businesses. They share different guides and publications that they develop. They share their marketing approaches. They share just operational best practices. So it's just been a really great group of people to be engaged with. And so it's really just an incredible network. So again, welcome. And, you know, I'm glad that you're here on the training today, and hope that you take a lot out of it. I encourage you to actively engage with the network, participate on committees that you'll be hearing about. And then, you know, do take advantage of the opportunities when we meet in person. You know, this year we'll be meeting in person. Usually there's an annual training of some kind, and it's just a great opportunity to network with your colleagues in other states, and, you know, just not only establish good, you know, opportunities for sharing information, but also just you can make a great group of friends through this network. So a lot of great people involved. I'd also like to introduce now my colleague, Lucy Cross, who's the co-chair or the vice chair of the National Steering Committee.
Hi, everyone. So happy to be here today. I appreciate the opportunity to introduce myself and kind of brag on the NSC and the National Small Business Assistance Program. My name is Lucy Cross. I'm the Director of Enterprise Services here at the Arkansas Department of Energy and Environment. We are a small section located in the DEQ. We house our SBEAP program in this section. So I've got my business liaison, Vanessa Kors. I think she might be on. She is our SBEAP coordinator. And so between she and I, you know, we do all the outreach and the business assistance for Arkansas, and dealing with permits and other programs that our agency offers. So I imagine most of you pretty much do the same thing. I know some of you are specific to air, others might be multimedia. Our group specifically is multimedia, so we get to deal with all the medias and, you know, have all of the weirdest inquiries come up. So, you know, that kind of leads me into, you know, why this entity is so great is because with us doing business assistance and helping the regulated community out, we see all kinds of questions posed and situations that, you know, these small businesses aren't necessarily equipped to handle. So I think all of us doing our part definitely helps them out substantially. So anyway, I've been on the NSC for, I guess this is, I can't even tell how long it's been at this point. It's kind of a blur, but it's been a great opportunity. I very much enjoy working with Chris and everyone else that's on the steering committee. So welcome everyone. Very happy to have you, and I hope you all get a bunch of information from today's session. So I'm going to turn over to Donovan now.
Actually, I think Abby has a couple of poll questions for us right now. All right. So these poll questions are essentially just a general ideas like, hey, what do you know so far? These are also some of the things that you might want to look at as we go through. We'll probably be answering the majority of these, but at the same time, uh, it's certainly is a matter of being able to start asking questions on it.
Can everybody see the poll? Are you able to click the answers?
Yes, I am.
Great. And make sure to scroll down. I think there's 10 questions.
Mhm.
And don't worry about getting the right or wrong answers. Just take your best guess.
Mhm. Yeah, we'll start to, once we have a little bit of time on this, we'll discuss these as we move into the general overview of the 507 programs or the SBEAP in general. This will sort of be covering what we are, why we are, to a degree, and what we do and how we're organized. I won't go into great depth about the different subcommittees because we'll have that later, hearing from each of the subcommittee chairs, co-chairs, and I'll even explain why we have co-chairs now.
All right, we got about more than half of people have submitted. Just a couple more minutes.
All right, Abby, we have about 50 people online, and how many polls do we receive?
We're at 43. I'm going to end it.
Okay, thank you.
Excellent. So as Abby gets those together, we'll start off with a we'll go over the poll questions, then we'll do a general overview of the SBEAP and overall 507 program. Then we'll hear from Paula Hogue from the EPA Asbestos Small Business Ombudsman Program. Following that, we'll have a 15-minute break, go into the history of the SBEAP, and then hear from each of the subcommittees. We'll also have another break there in the middle of that before we hear from the last couple of groups and wrap up for the day. So, looking at our first question, Section 507 of the Clean Air Act does require small business assistance. This is a federal rule that I'll go into more a little bit later, but it doesn't encourage, it requires states to have our program. So we are federally required. In EPA, shortly after that, released after the 1990 Clean Air Act amendments, which required us, EPA did create a guidance that said be as innovative as possible. So that's why our different programs are scattered in different areas. We'll talk a little bit more about where we're all housed and that we each have our own ability to be as innovative as possible, especially as it is how we connect with our own individual state businesses. Nobody's going to have the same type of methodology. Then, of course, originally, early on, it was the program was abbreviated as SBEAP, the Small Business Assistance Program. However, that got really confusing because a lot of people confused us with the Small Business Administration. They thought we had loans, and the type of assistance was unclear. So we added the E in many programs. Now, there are certain ones like EMAP in Pennsylvania, which Chris or somebody from Pennsylvania, what actually is that? I keep forgetting.
Environmental Management Assistance Program.
That's it. The management. I keep forgetting the management. So again, like I said, innovative, but it also makes it clear, like, hey, this is environmental assistance. Then this is actually sort of interesting, is like the SB State Environmental Agency is not something that's required as part of the SB. Usually most SBEAPs are housed within an environmental agency, but a lot of us are not. For example, Lena and Abby in Kansas, they're housed at the university. So is Chris over in Nevada, Pennsylvania. So there's several states that are housed in a university setting. And then there are also those that are housed in these small business development centers. So there's a lot of leeway as to where we're housed. Now, admittedly, there are other rules that require a state environmental agency. We'll also get into those a little bit later. Coming up, it does require that we notify business of their rights as well as their obligations. As part of the SBEAP, which we'll get into, I think, a little bit, or actually just above this, is the Ombudsman, which acts as an advocate. Hence, we can say, hey, if you're having problems with the state, here are some of your rights, but also your obligations to be in compliance, get a permit, and how to go about doing that. Then initial guidance stated P2 cannot be used as a component. Actually, yes, it very specifically said P2 can be a component of the SB. Even early on in the guidance, despite us being part of the Clean Air Act, it was already encouraging multimedia. So that's something that some states, they're restricted and only air only, but even the early guidance are saying, hey, be multimedia, be innovative. So we'll get into that a little bit more. That's certainly been one of the overall issues. Then defines a stationary source. We usually define it as 100 employees or less, not a major source. Depending on how a state defines what is a major source, these next two get a little iffy. Because in Tennessee, we define a major source as 100 tons per year or less of all regulated or any regulated pollutant. Here it sits at 50 tons. So there is again leeway, but this is the minimum requirements. If you go above and beyond that, that's part of that innovation. Then talking on the federal side, the Office of Small and Disadvantaged Business Utilization, that is part or the Asbestos and Small Business Ombudsman is housed in that overall group. So you may hear ASBO or OSDBU. So the ASBO is part of the OSDBU, and that's to help advocate for and advance business regulatory environmental compliance concerns. It's also does a lot of work with making sure that EPA utilizes small businesses. They do a lot of contracts and they set goals each year in association with the Small Business Administration, from my understanding. And I think they usually well achieve that. Somewhere over 20% of all contracts at EPA are to small businesses. And that's per what this the utilization program office does. Going down, it also advocates for them to help everybody understand. They also are working with different other groups to things like the small business advocacy review panels. They have a little bit of a hand in that. There's a lot of change going on right now, so I'm not sure where things are going right now, but that may also mean that the OSDBU is taking more of a hand in that. Paula may be able to speak a little bit more on that a little bit later. And then you may have heard the term of the Regional Air Small Business Liaison, or RASBL. These were something that were initially established. They went away for a while, and then we've recently, within the last 5 or 6 years, regained them. These are our primary regional contacts within the EPA regional offices. So they can be our go-to to contact with EPA on a more regional basis and a more technical basis. They've become, some of them are more active than others, but the more you utilize them, the more they see a need for the RASBL, as well as the more variety they have. Plus, one of their other positions is they hear what the small business and state issues are and can share that at a regional level, so that potentially a problem that they didn't even know existed, we bring to their fore and they start trying to find some way to deal with it, or provide us resources. So those are a couple of different things that the Regional Air Small Business Liaison can do for us. All right. So getting into the actual overview, and I'll flip my camera on this one. So
and I can send you to our e-form support.
thank you, Brittany. So as I go through this, please ask questions. If there's something that is a little bit off, or you don't understand, please let me know. This is supposed to be interactive. I certainly encourage that. Plus, at the same time, it's like, as Sarah's talking about, she's been with SBEAP for quite a long time in New Hampshire. Chris has been in it in 2 different states. For some reason, people have gotten the impression I might be the old man of the SBEAP. I found I am not. So we'll get into that a little bit later, but I've only really been involved at a national level for about 14 years. So we now have 35 years of history in the SBEAP, and I've only been around for less than half of that at a national level. So there may be things I missed. So if anybody who's on who has more experience see some, please jump in as well. We want this information to be correct, but at the same time, if you're new and you have questions, please ask. So what are our SBEAPs in general? They're the state level programs mandated by that federal statute, which is the Clean Air Act. Specifically Section 507, which is why we're also known as 507 programs. You may hear that acronym thrown around a little bit. That refers to the specific section in the Clean Air Act. So you can go to Section 507 and read how the law is actually written, and what it really requires of a state. In that, it specifically calls it the Small Business Stationary Source Technical and Environmental Compliance Assistance Program. That is an exceptionally long acronym. And we decided to shorten it down to the SBEAP because that is the Small Business Environmental Assistance Programs, because that is very specific as to what we do. We work with small businesses, we work in the environment, and we provide assistance to them. That's everything that we do is pretty much in our name. Overall, our basic goal is to provide free, confidential technical assistance to small businesses on any environmental question. So what that means is we're a free service because we should be paid, our salaries and overall programs should be supported by Title V source funds. That's actually written into the Clean Air Act. So essentially, the larger polluters are funding us to help smaller businesses. Just a sec, Gabby. Yeah. Confidential means they can come to us in confidence. There's not necessarily as strong a lawyer-to-client relationship or protections that we have, although some states do have that. They do have that confidentiality in their statutes. So they can actually point to us like, all right, this is what we can and can't say about it. Others have a memorandum of understanding. Some have a general policy and some have sort of an unwritten policy relying on Section 507 to provide our confidentiality. But in general, we try and act in a way so that if a business comes to us, even if they are referred to by a regulatory agency, we will work in confidence with that business to get them an answer. And usually that requires technical assistance. Whether it's helping them with a permit, and some states are able to do calculations for them. I know I do that a lot. Other states, they may do more of a consultant, in that they'll guide them through the requirements and then, all right, here's who you need, what you need to talk to when you do find a consultant. So there's a lot of different methodologies to this. There are others that also do outside contracting to consultants or engineers, so that the small business can get the accurate answer that they need. All right, now Abby. So why do we exist? As mentioned, the Clean Air Act, as amended in 1990, added Section 507 as well as a lot of other things, and that mandated the establishment of our program. It outlined the role of the Small Business Environmental Ombudsman, and an ombudsman, by definition, is somebody within a government that advocates for a group, if necessary, against the government. Examples are if a business feels they're unfairly being targeted by a regulatory agency, we're the ones that they call and we try and resolve the issue. In many cases, it's a matter of like we're doing what we should do, but every so often we hear stories that, yeah, we need to step in and do something. So fortunately for me, they've been pretty rare. So that also means if they come up, it's like, all right, I got to relearn from the start what I need to do. It also provides for the creation of the Compliance Advisory Panel. Based on recent surveys, not many states have an active Compliance Advisory Panel, unfortunately. I'm lucky that in Tennessee, we do have one. In fact, at least two of them are online today joining us in this training. You may have heard, as you've joined in early, you may have heard us talking with Carrie Maddox and Dr. Robert Wingfield. Those are two of my long-term CAP members. But the CAP is designed to give you a sounding board as well as outside advice. Because most of our programs are going to be small. I'll discuss how that's changed over the years a little bit later, but in general, we're not necessarily going to have as wide a view as we may want to. The CAP helps provide outside insight on our program as well as the issues of the small businesses and how we can best help them. So that way we're not locked in our ivory towers. Okay. As mentioned in the poll, how we define a small business. The Section 507 definition is baseline, but again, in that spirit of innovation, we can expand it if we deem it necessary. And sometimes it's just easier. For example, in Tennessee, we define a major source as anything that has 100 tons or fewer of a regulated pollutant, as well as talking about HAPs. So we have a very clear definition. It's also a change in how the permitting is done. So that's how we have sort of expanded our baseline. But 100 or fewer employees is pretty much a definite. There's sometimes that we do get questions from larger companies, and depending on the question, we may give general information or point them in the right direction, but we're not necessarily going to give them the hands-on, in-depth assistance that we might to an actual small business. Overall, it's estimated that there are 34.8 million small businesses in America. That's 99.9% of all businesses. So there's only the 0.1% of businesses out there that you're not going to be dealing with. Those are going to be your major sources. Those are going to be your Nissan, TVA, Anaconda Mining, different groups like that that are going to be emitting massive amounts. Usually your utilities, they measure their pollution in the tens of thousands or maybe in hundreds of thousands of tons of carbon monoxide, particulates, or whatever. And as Tony Pendola in North Carolina can tell you, he actually made some changes and they found out that the major polluters account for over 90% of all pollution. So that 0.1% of businesses account for 90% of the pollution. So, but at the same time, these businesses that we deal with are within communities. They're mom and pops, sometimes literally, in the community, and to keep them in compliance with environmental regulations helps keep that community safe. Because most of the Clean Air Act requirements and all these national emission standards for hazardous air pollutants and similar, they're not designed really to protect the environment. They're designed to protect human health. That is the measurement by which they base what a rule should be on. And as they occasionally go back through and look at it, if they need to change it, it's all based on human health and whatever the best science are. But small businesses also are very innovative, which is why they're the majority driver of net new jobs, because they find a niche and they try and get it in there. I actually just this week, I think maybe even yesterday, Lena probably posted the newest bulletin from the Small Business Administration, and you can go click on there and you look at your state and it gives you an overview of just how many new small businesses were created in your state, as well as how many new jobs they created. That's actually a link to a little bit of an older one or last year's, but actually that may be the more recent. I'm not sure. But again, look at that email from Lena and you can find it there. Okay, Abby, there we go. So as I discussed, we're all over the place. A lot of us are housed in state regulatory agencies, usually in the air division, but a lot of times we might be outside of it as well, either associated with a pollution prevention group. I know Kansas has a great P2 program. We're also housed in state universities, such as Pennsylvania, Nevada, Kansas again. Small business development centers. Actually, Pennsylvania is housed both in a small business development center and a university, because I think they're associated with the development center, which is housed in a university. Idaho is one that I recall is housed in a small business development center.
And a university.
What's that, Chris?
Idaho and Nevada are both SBDC and university based.
Okay. So definitely a lot of changes there. Some are even housed in economic development agencies. There may even be a few that are housed in commerce. The other interesting thing is sometimes they separate the ombudsman, and the ombudsman may be in the regulatory agency, and then the actual technical program may be housed somewhere else. So there's a lot of innovation, a lot of changes. Overall, our staffing ranges from a quarter of a full-time employee to 100. The average, depending on how you count it, ranges from about 2.7 to 7. I think more accurately, we're ranging about 3 people per state. So you think about that's approximately, if we average at about 3 per state, that's 150 people to assist 34 million businesses. So yeah, no wonder we feel overwhelmed sometimes. But here's an interesting thing that in the discussion, and Carrie, I'm going to steal that quote. The National Steering Committee and the group National SBEAPs, we act as a group together. So we are a force multiplier amongst ourselves. So if anybody in one state has a question about something, they can ask it to the group through the SBEAP main, or even the technical if they feel it's a very technical question. But we really encourage you to use the SBEAP main email server for any question you may have. If you don't know the answer and you think another state may have something, and sometimes you find out things and like, oh, I have a calculator for that because I've been dealing with it a lot, and it makes your job a lot easier. Similar for small businesses, they're always told, get together with your team and figure it out. Well, in most cases, the team is one person. But as Carrie said, the SBEAPs become that team for the small business. So they can come to us, and now they do have a team in their corner to help them out. And our impact is huge because just last year, we assisted over 100,000 small businesses with direct permit or site visit. Through our outreach, we're reaching about 11 million clients through our newsletters, workshops, webinars, whatever. So we are making a big impact and we are reaching out there. We've also had quotes from people that if we didn't receive your help, we'd have to close our business. So that's huge. If we're able to keep a business open and in compliance, those are some of our key things. Abby? So at the same time, we're also there to help the regulatory divisions. So how does that happen? Is sometimes regulatory divisions aren't allowed to give direct answers. They may say, go read the regulations. And if any of us have read regulations, we understand that it's complicated. It's not clear. I mean, even us as experts in that area, we have questions about it. But by, in a way, acting as the middleman with the regulatory divisions, we're able to provide greater understanding and less confusion on the requirements for the small businesses, which then means they submit more complete and accurate permit applications, which should make the regulatory division side job easier because they can look at and say, all right, everything is correct. I don't have to send a letter saying this is incomplete. Here's what I need more, and have a business not understand what is being requested. We also help teach them how to keep more accurate records and reporting so that whenever they send in a report, it is more likely to be accurate. And if an inspector comes out, their records are hopefully in better shape. In some ways, we're able to provide feedback as well to the regulatory divisions, especially air pollution control agencies, so that they have a better understanding of what activities are going on in business. Sometimes I've been asked by our air pollution controls, like, can you help them? And they have one thought about what's going on in business, but that's not what's really going on. So we help clarify that. We also make that good relationship so that small businesses are more willing to ask for help because they are getting help rather than just enforcement. And that way, we're also encouraging them to get into compliance rather than a revolving door of enforcement. Because if a regulatory agency says, all right, you need to do this, and the business doesn't understand and the business doesn't do it, then they're going to get fined. But at no time have they really been taught what needs to be done. And that's where we really step in, is teach them what needs to be done. It's also interesting. There is a webinar several years ago that was a study, I think, on about 120 Michigan businesses that found it was more expensive to be out of compliance than in compliance by about an average of $30,000 per year per million of production. So if you have a company that's doing $1 million of production, and they're in compliance, it's saving them 30,000, which that's a fair bottom line. The other interesting thing, the smaller the business, in many ways, the more expensive it is for them individually on a per person basis to be in compliance. Current estimates are a small business that costs them about $4,000 annually to stay in compliance and keep track of all this. Whereas a larger company, it suddenly drops down to under 1,000 per employee. So again, we become that team that helps them stay in compliance, and we're a free service. So each of us are in our own states, and we've tried to get together some to have a way to work together. The primary group is the National Steering Committee. This is headed currently by Chris as our chair and Lucy as our vice chair. And then we have a representative and a alternate representative from each region, as well as each chair and or co-chairs of the different subcommittees are all part of this National Steering Committee. We have website resources, annual training, educational, technical, promotional, as well as connecting with other associations. So these are our main divisions within the National Steering Committee and how we divide up our different subcommittees. All right, Abby, there we go. So the National Steering Committee has that mission to serve, support, and strengthen the SBEAP through representation collaboration. What this generally means is they serve as sort of a central point where we can bring issues, we can discuss it as a nation, and sometimes we'll even write comment letters on different rules. Sometimes we actually do affect changes. For example, we were asked to be part of the Small Business Advocacy Review Panel for the air reporting requirements. They were looking at changing those. Some states, such as Wisconsin, from my understanding, and maybe Nebraska, actually already have more stringent air reporting requirements, but most of the states, they only report criteria pollutants. So your particulates, SOx, NOx, and so forth. This would have expanded to every individual hazardous air pollutant would have required reporting. One of the biggest changes I actually know that we made through comments is their original threshold for reporting for perchloroethylene, which is used in a lot of dry cleaners, was like 10 pounds. Or styrene was 10 pounds. And styrene is used in a lot. I actually estimate any boat manufacturer or place that uses it at a moderate level would exceed that threshold within 10 hours of production. They changed it up to 10 tons, which is also the threshold which they would become a major source. So that's one direct change that I know we've done. We've done many other rule comments over the years. You can actually find a lot of those up on our website. As I noted, they're made up from the representatives of the 10 EPA regions, also the different subcommittees, and provides general comments. Okay. I mentioned our website. I'm actually co-chair with Lena on our website. This was originally created through a grant from EPA and currently is still hosted by the Kansas State Pollution Prevention Institute. This website contains a lot of resources. It contains your calculators, resources both for small businesses as well as our SB programs. It has guides on there. We feature a couple of rules, a lot of tools associated with the more common ones, such as auto body shops, engines, welding, just some of the examples. We have a lot of notes from the different subcommittees on there. One of the things I find most useful is the contact information. They did a really great job of setting up the map of the US. And you just click on the state and then you find out who to contact for that. It also has the information on the subcommittee trainings as well as a lot of additional resources. Now we'll talk a little bit later about some of the changes that are about to occur on that, but these resources are not going to go away. We have them up there and they're for all of us to use. And we also encourage, like, if you create something new, let us know. This is a great way to share it. Okay, Abby? We try to connect with a lot of other associations and organizations. Carrie mentioned he was part of the American Coding Association. We've had several of them on our technical subcommittee talking about different things that are coming up in the paint world, especially in relation to the 6H rule, which was the miscellaneous surface coating and auto body shop rule. And there's also one related to paint manufacturing in specific that specifically affects Carrie. But connecting with the association lets us learn about new things. It also lets us share different things. For example, there's a great one on refrigeration. Refrigeration accounts for about 30% of the energy costs at most convenience stores or grocery stores. And they can switch to a more environmental friendly methodology. It can reduce their energy costs as well as keeping everything nice and cool. We have some associations are important enough to us that we have representatives that follow the group and attend their meeting and report back to us. These include the National Association of Clean Air Agencies, the Association of Air Pollution Control Agencies. Some states actually are part of both. There were some political changes that caused them to split a while back, but each of them essentially do the same thing. They are associations of your regulatory agencies. There's also the Environmental Council of States. A lot of times the environmental commissioners may be part of this, and they have various other subcommittees. I'm personally the representative of the compliance subcommittee of the ECOS. Then there's the Clean Air Act Advisory Committee that's directly associated with EPA. And then there's also the Environmental Protection Agency itself. We have a lot of contact with them, usually through Paula, but sometimes through our regional air small business liaisons, or we may be on other subcommittees in association with that, depending on what we're doing and how we connected. For example, previously, I'm trying to remember her name now. She's been retired for a few years, but she was down in Mississippi. And it wasn't until she was just retiring that I found out she was in the National Environmental Justice Advisory Committee as we were starting to work into that. So we sometimes get involved in other areas as well. And then that's also our trade associations, small business administration, especially their Office of Advocacy, and the National Compliance Assistance Centers, which we sort of mirror in some ways. And we have a lot of links to them, and they have some links back to us. I mentioned Paula several times. She's the Asbestos Small Business Ombudsman. I know that I saw earlier Elnora, Mary, and a few others who are working with Paula are on as well. And Paula will be speaking immediately after this. But she is one of our primary contacts at EPA headquarters itself. They help develop various tools at a national level, support us through training and website. They're the ones who helped develop the grant that had been going on now for 10 years and serves as our general liaison between small business and EPA. They maintain a hotline, and every so often a state will, or a business will call the EPA hotline, and then EPA will, or Paula will refer it down to the state to deal with more directly. Then in the regions itself, we have the regional air small business liaisons as our primary contact. I believe we now have one in every region. As I said earlier, some of them are more active than others, but the more we utilize them, the more they see a need and the more they should be active with us and better understand our programs and better be able to advocate for us at a regional level. Okay, so I see a question has popped up there. Just a sec, Abby. Loose definition was provided for small business. So Section 507 has very specific definitions as to what a small business is. So in our terms, a small business has 100 or fewer employees. It also is not considered a major source of air pollution, which that can be defined in different ways based on your state, but generally that has a direct connotation to Title V of the Clean Air Act, meaning if they emit more than 100 tons of particulates, sulfur dioxide, nitrous oxides, volatile organic compounds, or they have more than 10 tons per year of any single hazardous air pollutant or 25 tons of combination of hazardous air pollutant, they would be considered a major source. Now, here's the thing is a major source may still have fewer than 100 employees. So you have to balance both of those criteria. Section 507 specifically says 50 tons or less of any single criteria pollutant and no more than 75 tons of any combination criteria pollutants. You may be able to keep with that, or you may want to expand it. Medium businesses, I would say, would be anything above 100 up to probably 500. The reason I say 100 to 500 is because the Small Business Administration definition is 500 or fewer employees. So if we're having our true small businesses as 100 or fewer, and the Small Administration says 500 or fewer, then that I would say that 100 to 500 would be considered a medium, and anything above 500 would be really a large business. So hopefully that answers your question there, Deborah. And if not, please let me know. All right. Now with that, do I have any additional questions? And feel free to come off mute and ask them. All right. Hearing none, I will turn it over to Paula Hogue with the US EPA Asbestos and Small Business Ombudsman Program to talk about what the ASBO does and as well as any updates that they have there. So Paula, it's all yours.
Thank you, Donovan. Hi, everybody. All right, I'm going to just take a moment and pull up my slides because I'm thinking those are not blended in. Is that correct, Abby?
I thought I had them, but I didn't.
Oh.
I'm sorry. But I have them right
No
here
worries.
if you want me to go ahead and pull them up.
Sure, if that's easier, because I'm already seeing I'm not sure what to click on when I went to pull them up. But I did send you the most recent slide deck.
Is that right?
All right, so, okay. There it is. So as Donovan said, he was really great in covering a lot about the 507 program and mentioned my name a few times. So I'm Paula Hogue. I am the EPA Asbestos Ombudsman and Small Business Ombudsman. So we just kind of say Asbestos and Small Business Ombudsman. I always like to clarify, it's actually 2 different ombudsman roles combined into one. And we'll go ahead to the next slide and I'll just kind of go over what I'll share with you today. I get a fairly good chunk of time with you all. I typically like to kind of keep it light and quick, and then there's time for questions, or I can go back into some further detail. But for today, I just wanted to cover, what is the ASBO program? What do I do here at EPA? What does my team and I work on day to day? Which would include, of course, covering some of the resources and services that we provide, what type of outreach or engagement that we offer, and how we connect with you all in the 507 program. And also talk about ombudsman reporting, and then I will finalize it with some contact information and questions. Next slide. Next slide. ASBO program overview. All right, so this is the kind of the infographic that you'll see at the front of our website. If you go to, we have a long website address, so I'll just say I always just Google or put into the search engine EPA ASBO, and this is the first thing that will pop up is our program webpage. And the infographic is to try to cover kind of the idea that this is 2 different ombudsman roles combined into one program. So the Asbestos Ombudsman role was created under the Asbestos Hazard Emergency Response Act. Congress required that EPA have an asbestos ombudsman. And the Small Business Ombudsman role, honestly, when I took on this role, I wasn't quite sure if it came from specifically somewhere, if it originated from the Section 507 of the Clean Air Act. I now strongly believe it came before 1990 in the Section 507. It was probably a development under the RFA, the Regulatory Flexibility Act. All federal agencies are required to consider small business impacts in their rulemaking. That came out in the 1980s. Although EPA was not required to create a small business ombudsman, I believe that was where the role originated from, to really help serve as a contact or resource for small businesses in our rulemaking, regulatory compliance, or enforcement. So both of those roles were combined into one program back in the 90s. I took on this role in 2020, but I've been with the program for quite a number of years, even prior to that. And ultimately, both ombudsman roles are here to provide, assistance. We're really an external facing ombudsman role. And next slide, I'll talk a little bit more about the general ombudsman profession. And I think that that's helpful. Next slide here. Mostly because, as Donovan mentioned, the ombudsman term is used throughout both the government. It's used in a lot of healthcare facilities, but not always are people familiar with what an ombudsman is. And believe me, I've had to learn quite a bit over the years. But typically speaking, especially here on the federal government side, an ombudsman or ombudsperson, I also go by ombuds just to kind of make it more generic, is an official that is in charge of serving as a representative, an advocate for a fair process. And I think that that's really an important component by addressing questions or investigating public complaints. So an advocate for a fair process, I like to highlight that because I want to clarify both to the small businesses that contact me, as well as to, honestly, my counterparts and colleagues here at EPA. I don't claim to make any promises to go to battle for the small business. I'm really making sure that I am an advocate for a fair process. And that, like Donovan said, most of the time when we dig in a little deeper, we do see that EPA is following its small business policies and procedures, and they are working and acting in a fair manner. Sometimes I think there's not a great understanding, and there's some confusion that the public or small businesses may have. So I think of my role as a really great way to help coach or educate the public or small businesses on asbestos questions, or specifically on regulations that impact small businesses. But there are a few times where we've had to go through and really make sure we were following our processes, procedures, that enforcement was done appropriately. So anyway, the ombudsman profession, it is important to serve as kind of an impartial, independent, and confidential resource. And so I don't sit within any of the program offices. I'm not in the air office. I'm not in the chemical office for asbestos. I am under the Office of the Administrator in the Office of Small and Disadvantaged Business Utilization. And some of that may kind of shift over this new administration. There's some changes that are happening throughout the government. So we'll certainly let you know when we know more. But for now, we're independent of any of those program offices. I highlighted here, if the slide deck does become available to everyone, a lot of these things are hyperlinked. But in terms of my role or as an ombudsman, just to clarify, that is using an ombudsman is defined under the Alternative Dispute Resolution Act. So Congress does encourage federal agencies to consider using ombuds as a way to resolve conflict in, more effective, informal, rather than going to litigation, to try to clear up any issues, confusion. And so that needs to happen when it's, early on in the process. We don't want to typically help a business when they've already started to go to litigation. I have to bow out, because then it's turned into a more formal process. But early, I can serve as an independent and impartial resource to help address and ensure operational excellence here at EPA. And then lastly, I just want to mention the final report from the Administrative Conference of the U.S. If anyone's curious about the use of ombudsman on the federal level, that is a really great report from 2016 that covers all of the uses of ombuds and kind of sets some standards of practice for calling yourself an ombudsman in the federal government. Next slide. So ASBO resources and services. So one of the big ways that we help both people in the public that have asbestos questions or concerns and the small businesses that have, we focus on regulated small businesses that are have questions about enforcement or compliance. We have a hotline. So we have staff that are there to answer questions during regular business hours. And we often hear that we're one of the few people that answer our phones, which I take pride in that. I mean, I think it's important. I know a lot of things are becoming more digitized or everything's online. A lot of people prefer to Google and look online, but there's still a lot of folks that want to talk with somebody. They need to get through some of those weird, nuanced questions and things are not figuring out online. So that's what we're here for. My hotline staff do kind of serve as the first line of response. And then when there's those tricky questions, more long, complicated issues, I do step in as the ombuds. They'll elevate the issue to me. A lot of times they're just quick and easy state referrals. We do, for instance, if we get a question from a business in Nevada, we would say, okay, that sounds like you're having you might need some assistance on how to address your regulatory requirements. Why don't we get you in touch with Chris Lynch and his team in Nevada on the Small Business Assistance Program, and they can walk you through some of the more finer details. If there's questions about like a specific rulemaking that EPA has head up, that's where I can help navigate on the headquarters EPA level, where most of the EPA rulemakings come out. Those type of specific questions or concerns, we may use our regulatory small business liaisons to address maybe specific regs that are more regional specific. So that is a big service that we provide, is the hotline. And that EPA hotline assistance text there is hyperlinked to you can actually go to all of the EPA hotline directory there. Next slide. I don't know if this, I can't see the text very well, but basically this was a slide to talk about, thank you, our monthly bulletin, the Small Biz at EPA. And that is a great way for the states to share resources and information. Typically, we know a lot of the SBEAPs, you all in the states rely on this bulletin as a way to kind of consolidate and keep, there's so much going on, so much coming out of the agency. We do our best here in our team to determine which rulemakings that are coming out may be of impact to small business. I have to admit that's very hard. There's a question here at headquarters when they're developing a rulemaking, is this going to impact small business? Almost always they say don't know, specifically the program office that's writing the rulemaking. And, there's hundreds that come out quarterly to try to keep up with. So we do our best in seeing what we see that the agency is kind of highlighting as big issues. Obviously, if there's a small business advocacy review panel, like a rulemaking, this is where the Regulatory Flexibility Act piece comes in. If there's a rulemaking that EPA cannot certify that it may have an impact on small business, it gets pushed into what's called a SPAR, Small Business Advocacy Review Panel process. We definitely try to highlight those in our bulletin and keep folks up to date with that, because we know those will be impactful to small businesses as they roll out. But we also cover just different highlights of events and items that we think might be of interest to the regulated small business community. Next slide. Oh, and I do encourage you to subscribe if you haven't already, especially now that our listservs are a little less, are going to be maybe harder to keep up to date. There's a website here. If you click on that subscribe here button, you can go and subscribe to our newsletter and get that directly to your email. Next slide. Okay, so Donovan mentioned the 507 cooperative agreement. Of course, the 507 program under the Clean Air Act, there was requirements for the state, for EPA, and for my ombudsman role specifically. Yeah, we can put some of those links in the chat. Thanks. So the ombudsman role, my role, is really encouraged to monitor and provide oversight to the overall program to ensure that small business assistance is happening. There's been a lot over the decades in how we've done that. And there's been encouragement to do some reporting and things to try to keep up with, just generally speaking, our mission is to provide support to the small business community. So we knew that helping connect the dots and getting the states or the small businesses to you all in the states is very important. The 507 program cooperative agreement that we've had for the last 10 years was a way to do that. It was a collaborative resource. We had the website. There was also supporting the contact list and listservs, as well as annual training support, so that every year there was some sort of funding support or what was the travel scholarships to be able to attend. So all of that was funded through the Small Business Ombudsman program in the Small Business Office. Unfortunately, we just recently got word that we will not be able to renew at this point. And this month is the final year of the 5-year cooperative agreement that we've had in place. Luckily, the website will be able to stay up for at least a couple of years. And we'll hope to see where things land in the coming months as far as continuing to provide support through this grant. But at the current time, we're just grateful that KSU and the PPI staff have been willing to keep the resource up and live. And I think some minor tweaks and updates will be available, but there'll still be a lot of relevant and up-to-date information on that website. They'll still be available for small business that wants to kind of take a look at what might be impacting their regulatory compliance. So we definitely appreciate the hard work through the cooperative agreement, and that's been a resource that we've committed to over the last 10 years. Next slide. So this is the last item I was going to just share that it was a recent thing that we've completed. It's the Smart Steps to Sustainability Guide. We just updated. We made it fully web-based. In the past, it used to be like a PDF. We'd had a couple different iterations over the years. And so we really wanted to say, yes, we understand regulatory compliance is important, but we really want to encourage businesses to think beyond their regulatory compliance and go into sustainability. We know that a lot of you SBEAPs have P2 grants, so thinking beyond just how to make sure you do the bare minimum regulatory wise, but maybe even thinking broader beyond that, how to really navigate that process of saving your, reducing your pollution to save money, to think outside the box with all those great initiatives that we highlighted. A lot of voluntary programs here for this guide. It's web-based. We do have to do some updates to it, so just bear with us here. We're still trying to get some navigation and how to do that with the new administration. But this came out in October of 2024. And we are really excited to encourage folks to use that. It actually even has a create your own sustainability plan. So like if you're a small business, we know you're busy, take our kind of template plan that allows you to kind of plug and chug your information and create a really nice looking sustainability plan that you can share with your coworkers or your constituents or your customers, so that they can show that you can show that you're really showing an initiative in the sustainability path. So that was a new resource that we put together, and we do all kinds of different stuff like that throughout the years. Next slide. All right, so I just covered the resources and services, and now I want to talk a bit about outreach and engagement. I'm going to put those links in once I get done with the presentation. I can't multitask. My brain doesn't work that well, but I will do that once I'm done here. So you can also Google stuff. Like I feel like if you put in the ASBO small business EPA bulletin and things like that, it'll pop up. All right, so like we've talked about, engaging with the states is really important to my office and the Ombudsman program, because we rely on so much on what you all do in the states. Really, EPA wide relies on how you all in the states provide support. Because, like Donovan mentioned, there's, EPA's hands can be tied sometimes in how much we can provide support. The enforcement office may go out and do an inspection, but they're not fully able to kind of help them figure out what they need to do. They're wearing these two hats that can be really difficult to kind of walk that line of enforcement and helping. So you all as a state small business assistance programs do really important work that my office has continued to provide support and encourage EPA to really engage with you all. So this is a picture of a recent event last year in Region 6 Dallas. The SBEAPs in Region 6 had never gotten to really meet with at the Dallas office. So we helped facilitate and organize and plan that with some great deal of support from the states in Region 6. Oklahoma specifically really helped, show, hey, we need to meet with EPA. We need that interface. We need to understand what they do, what we do. And so that was a really great event that we periodically help facilitate, as well as the annual training SBEAPs event. We make sure our deputy administrator attends those and is prepared to provide some sort of leadership remarks at those events. We always attend the SBEAP training, and we just feel like it's important to kind of connect the dots so that we can provide the help and support to small business as much as possible. Next slide. Thank you. I don't know what happened here. So this one is our partnership with the Office of Civil Enforcement. Thanks. So here, like I mentioned, we have our Office of Enforcement and Compliance Assurance, OECA, that many of you are familiar with. And in OECA, the large umbrella office, there's a smaller office called the Office of Civil Enforcement, and they are really kind of like creating the policy and planning and kind of management of all the regional office, inspectors and enforcement officers. So typically say if I get in one of those tricky questions from small business, I have my contacts in OCE that I'll say, hey, I see Region 3. Can we set up a meeting to figure out what's going on here? I found that that's worked really well rather than just working directly with the regional enforcement office. Having that headquarters conduit has been really important. But we also coordinate my office with OCE on an annual survey to the Small Business Administration based around that RFA SBEAP requirement I mentioned earlier. And so we've actually gotten an A rating for over a decade now on how EPA responds to complaints, questions, and concerns on regulations that impact small business. So it's been a good relationship that we've had. There's some new leadership here in the National Ombudsman. And so we're just kind of coordinating our communication across the agency on how does EPA respond to enforcement issues that directly impact small business. And so the Civil Enforcement Office is the team that I work with on that. Next slide. So also we work with the SBA directly. There's a really great office, the Office of Advocacy, which I'm sure many of you may have heard of some of those environmental roundtable meetings. The Office of Advocacy is technically not part of SBA, but they are. It's very weird. But I think that they actually do almost serve a lot like an ombudsman. They're there as an advocate. They try to help connect those dots. So, we have a lot in common. I've been getting some referrals more recently. They have a red tape hotline, and I imagine I'll be getting more of those where a small business contacts SBA and they have a complaint about all different federal agencies. But if an EPA rulemaking comes up, I'm going to get that call to help kind of navigate how to address that red tape complaint. So more to come on that, but I think it's been a great partnership. A lot of times the Office of Advocacy will host those environmental roundtable meetings where they actually have EPA program office leadership come in and do an overview of the rulemaking that they are rolling out. So it's a great way for EPA to get some feedback from small businesses on their, proposed rulemaking. And, I think it's fascinating to listen to the small businesses to hear how things are really going to impact them on the ground, because a lot of times EPA is very separated from, like, we do the science, we have all this, info data that we're trying to synthesize to meet the needs of the administration or Congress, what they've authorized us to do. But we really need to hear from small businesses and say, does this even make sense? Are you even using this chemical? Does this reporting requirement, really make sense? There's all kinds of things that I think getting that feedback from the small business community is crucial. And so this is a kind of a cooperation or engagement support link that we do with them. And then like I mentioned, the National Ombudsman, that program is there to make sure that the federal agencies are complying with the RFA, the Regulatory Flexibility Act, Small Business Regulatory Enforcement Fairness Act, and they do some other great work that we're in work in collaboration with them as well. Next slide. All right, so this is the last section I'll talk about Ombuds reporting. Next slide. So as Donovan talked about the 507 program and some of the different responsibilities, the states have some responsibilities in setting up these different small business ombudsman and SBEAP programs. EPA has responsibility in terms of helping the states set up those programs. We had those SIP requirements in the early 90s, and they developed the guidelines in 1992. But there was also a defined role for the small business ombudsman at EPA, and that was to monitor. I think that's like the title was monitoring. And so there's an idea of oversight and monitoring. A big way of doing that is kind of taking in information and developing reports. So providing transparency, encouraging accountability, because frankly, as an ombuds, I have no authority to make the changes that need to happen, but I can highlight what we're hearing and put that information out to kind of shed some light for encouraging folks to kind of do the right thing, if you will. So with regards to reporting under the 507 program, there's been some confusion with that. Like, is that intended to be an ongoing role for EPA and the ombuds, or was that just to help in implementing the programs? So we're still kind of looking at that, especially now with the administration. I want to make sure that they get to weigh in on some of the decisions that were made at the tail end of the previous administration. But ultimately, I still take on this role as wanting to report out on what we're hearing and doing. So the ombuds reporting is something that, as of 3 years ago, we put together our first official asbestos ombudsman and small business ombudsman report. And unfortunately, it's not made externally available. It was internal only. But we do have our highlights available on our website. And the commitment that my program and I have made is that we'll do that every 3 years. It covers everything that we're hearing on the asbestos side, as well as the small business side. And it's to try to encourage accountability. We're not just a black box that's taking in information. We need to share that out and help improve operational excellence by making recommendations and connecting those dots. Next slide. So this is the highlights that you could see on our website. And so the next upcoming report will be in the spring of 2026. And I am hoping, I do think ombudsman reporting should be made public. There is no requirement for us to do so. So that's kind of where the hesitation was. But I'm going to encourage that if we can, I think we should provide this report and make it publicly available. Nonetheless, we'll make sure to have the highlights available, which these are some more recent highlights, that 25%, there's been a 25% increase in overall inquiries compared to last year. So we're seeing a big uptick with an 80% increase in small business requests for assistance. So that's pretty significant. 65% of our inquiries are from the public, which are usually focused on asbestos. And then 31% of all inquiries are small businesses, and they're usually seeking compliance assistance or often product registration assistance. So that's just kind of to give you a sense of some of the types of highlights or some of the types of, callers and the way we provide support or services through the hotline. And that will be updated, of course, with a full report in the next, 8 months or so. Next slide. All right, so I covered pretty high level everything that our program does, how we kind of connect with you all in the states, our ongoing support to work with you all in making sure that the small business community has as much support as they can to comply with our environmental regulations. That is our ultimate goal here at EPA, to make sure that we're protecting human health and the environment. So, I'm just going to continue to stay focused on coordinating with you all, even though we haven't got the grant funding and support locked in at this time. We'll still continue to be a partner. I have my contact information. I encourage any of you who have questions, want to share with me what you're doing in your state. If you're new, you have kind of some confusion, tricky issues, let me know. That's what I'm here for. You can either reach our hotline, you can contact me directly. Email is probably the best way. It's hoag.paula@epa.gov. And I just look forward to meeting you all, hopefully here in Salt Lake City in October. And that's it for me. Are there any questions? Feel free to come off mute, or you can put them in the chat.
In case anyone missed it in the chat, we will have this slideshow with hyperlinks on the website, along with a recording of this presentation. So you will have access to all the links in Paula's presentation.
Thank you, Abby. I didn't know if I missed a couple of questions in the chat.
Yeah, I'm looking through right now, Paula. There doesn't seem to be, but I have a question, and we didn't quite cover. I'm not sure why. We didn't, probably because Rhonda's not on the call. Regional air business liaisons, because we do have a few of them on this call, and what's their role and how to interact with you versus us. Any highlight on that?
Yeah, that's a good point. I did kind of glaze over that. So I mean, typically in the past, the Small Business Ombudsman Office has tried to have some sort of regional support on engaging with small businesses in the regions. We really struggled to get that in the different regional EPA offices. The AIR office has had better luck with that, with the regional AIR small business liaisons, which we felt like that was at least something, because typically the 507 program, it's under the Clean Air Act. Most of the questions are coming in from the air related community. So that was the commitment that Rhonda and her office were able to make a few years ago. They were able to lock in those air roles from each regional office. I will say that that's been really tough for the regional offices. Sometimes they are strapped very thin, is my impression. And so that air person may have, 10 to 20% that they can commit to the regional air small business liaison role. So it really depends on the region how much of a support system they can provide to you all in the States. But I will say that, ask them questions. Like if you see that they are available, well, you have their contact info. If you have a specific question about a rulemaking that may be specific to a region and want to get that extra help, I think they can be a good resource to help you navigate the best point of contact. It may not be them, but at least help get to the right person in the region to get some of those questions answered. You can contact my office too if you're not sure. Maybe it's a headquarters question. We can help you kind of figure that out. I think Rhonda's offered to do that as well. Internally, EPA, Rhonda's shop, the RASBLs, my office do meet quarterly just to kind of talk internally about how to stay connected, what things might be coming up. But I think there is a little bit of kind of a people are starting to kind of wait and see what's happening with the administration changes. How is that going to impact the AIR office? I think that's pretty significant, but I'm not quite sure yet. I know the Office of the Administrator is going to be impacted, but we haven't gotten that formal announcement yet. So it's a bit of a holding pattern while we wait to hear. And I will say also the regional folks, from what I understand, are sometimes they've lost up to 20 to 25% of their entire regional office staff with the deferred resignations and early retirement. So that's going to be pretty tough for a lot of regions to still meet some of those commitments that they've made in the past. So just want to be fair warning with that. But ultimately, the idea is to just be a more regional support for the states in that region to get, some of those local specific assistance that comes up. I hope that's helpful. Any other questions?
Well, thank you, Paula. I appreciate that. As always, you can contact any of the presenters directly, or we will have this on the recording. What we're going to do now is take a break, be back at 2:45. So here's the deal. Do not unbreak this link. Stay on. Take 15 minutes. Do what you need to do, but stay on. We will turn off the recording so we can stop now, Abby. And then we'll return for those. Thank you for recording, Abby. And you didn't see the two questions in the chat. You feel free to add them now if you haven't answered. One was, what are you currently reading? What book are you currently reading? And the other one was, what is your favorite board game? And both were really fun to read through. I tell you what, this is just a great group. What can I say? So with that note, we are going to move on to Donovan again, who's going to give a history of the SBEAP.
All right, so y'all want to hear about the history of the SBEAP. Well, I aged a little bit while we were in the break, but so like I was saying, I'm not necessarily the oldest person here, at least not being here in the SBEAP, but they asked me to do the history, so here it is. And as you can see, we're here to have some fun with this as well. So please keep asking your questions, jump in at any point. This right here is the picture from the last year's annual training down in Chattanooga, which we hosted here in Tennessee. Definitely a great group of people. So, but we're going to go back in time, where we come from, what we accomplished, and how do we build from there. All right. So, where did we start? Technically, we didn't really start at the Clean Air Act, which came out in 1963, but that's leading up to us. It was one of the first and most influential modern environmental laws for the U.S. It had that goal of reducing air pollution nationwide, and it even predates the EPA. Back then, it was the Administration for Public Health or something like that, if I recall. Um, as it sort of set up, but this sort of set up the idea that environmental laws were becoming important because at that point, Chattanooga, where we visited last year, was considered one of the most polluted cities in the entire U.S., even more than LA, which gets a lot of bad flack over the years. But at the time, Chattanooga was bad enough, especially with the steel production, that ladies' nylons, your hose, would melt right off your legs. And guys would take an extra white shirt to work so they could change into a clean white shirt because by the time they got to work, it would have turned gray. So the Clean Air Act started changing that around. Even back then, most of the rules were developed on human health. And it got going pretty well. And the first big set of amendments was 1970 under President Richard Nixon. That's where it required the very newly formed EPA to determine which air pollutants pose the greatest threats to public health and create our national ambient air quality standards. These are the ones that control the criteria pollutants, particulates, NOx, SOx, volatile organic compounds, ozone, lead, and a few others like that. They also started developing their first list of hazardous air pollutants. This list has changed every so often over the years, and it originally had, I want to say, 186, maybe 190. Some of them were taken off. However, about 5 years ago was the first addition to that list since it was formed, and that was N-propyl bromide. So some of you may have remembered us talking about that. But this sort of led to the development early on of initial and national emission standards for hazardous air pollutants. These are all health-based. Okay, that was weird. All right, Abby?
Sorry, that was my issue.
Okay, no problem. All right. So then there's yet another set of amendments in 1977 under Jimmy Carter. This sort of provided that regular review of the National Air Quality Standards, as well as a permanent independent scientific review committee. You may have heard the term of residual risk and review. This is sort of where that started, though. Those are more related to the National Emission Standards for Hazardous Air Pollutants, which came on just a little bit later. But it's a standard of reviewing them. This is also where we started collecting data from the states. You may have heard of attainment, non-attainment areas. This is also where that started, is under the 1977 amendments. Now, 1990 is where there's the probably largest overhaul of these Clean Air Act amendments of any time since the initial. So the first ones are sort of like getting things started, and then 1990 completely changed a lot of things. It codified your HAP list, put it into the act, required the creation of technology-based standards, required that review every 8 years of every single national emission standard for hazardous air pollutants, and there are a lot of them. They've actually gone through the alphabet 7 times at this point. They haven't necessarily used every letter and every combination of letters, but when we say something like 6H, 7D, N, M, those all actually have direct meanings and directly refer to a specific rule that is the National Emission Standards for Hazardous Air Pollutant, if we're just talking about Part 63. If we're talking about Part 60, now we're talking about national standards for news source performance standards. Those also have gone through the alphabet a lot of times. So when we say like NSPS 3.0, we're talking about rock crushers. We talk about 4E, that's the other solid waste incinerators. All these different rules that got really, really complicated, but that's where they really came from. And all these new niche apps, one of the other things is they started affecting smaller and smaller businesses. And in fact, especially the 1990 changes were going to affect a lot of businesses. At that time, dry cleaners in particular were considered a major source of air emissions for chlorethylene. But chlorethylene is on that HAP list. And that at the time represented about 90% of the industry was using perchloroethylene. And they were using upwards of 1,500 gallons per year. And most of that was becoming emissions. So about they were actually clearing the 10 ton per year threshold in some cases for perchloroethylene emissions. Other groups, such as the Printers Industry of America, now they've been merged into the Printing United Alliance, they started lobbying that small businesses will need help with those new rules. And that's where we come in. So enter the SBEAP. Section 507 was added due to that lobby pressure from associations representing small businesses. So it was not Congress itself or anybody that created us, but it was that lobby pressure from outside associations saying, we represent a lot of small businesses, and if you're making all these new rules that most small businesses are not going to read those rules. And in fact, it's up to the associations to that's one of their jobs is to read these rules, comment on them, try and make changes to them, but also inform their members. But not everybody's a member. The smaller the business, the less likely it's a member of an association. So they wouldn't get word about this until an enforcement came knocking on their door and said, you're out of compliance. And they realized that wasn't a good situation. So they actually lobbied to get a small business assistance program into the act. This law required the core components of the Ombudsman, technical assistance, and the compliance advisory panel. This way you have somebody that can be a point of contact for small businesses and advocate for them if they're having issues, technical assistance to help them comply with the rules, and compliance advisory panels so that businesses can communicate back and forth with their technical assistance and the ombudsman. And it's sort of like they act as a representative of the communities and the businesses for which the small business is assisting. Now, EPA had a role in this too. They were to issue guidelines, provide advisory opinions on program effectiveness, and a lot of this was done through the Asbestos and Small Business Ombudsman. And you just heard through Paula some of how it's changed over the years, but also where it's still a core mission of the ASBO. So next slide, please. So this is where we really began to get started, about 1990. SBEAPs began to form. States would submit what's known as a state implementation plan. And this was how they were going to develop the program, where it's going to be housed, what type of role it would be, and a lot of things like that. And they had to submit that EPA for approval. EPA would read through it and then say, yeah, this meets the requirements, or here's where you have some efficiencies, do a little bit better. This became part of 40 CFR Part 52. So if you want to go find where your state implementation plan is for your personal state, that's where to go. Go to the Electronic Code of Federal Regulations and then go to Part 40. And you may have to dig through a little bit, but under the AIR programs, you'll find eventually Part 52, and it's divided up into different states. Now, states had to submit this in November 15, 1992. And as states were developing their SIPs, EPA released their guidance in January of that year. There's a link to it. It's a little bit of an older document. I think Paula had talked about updating it. Every so often there's been a few things added to it, but that I believe might be the original 1992 guidance. It did note that some states already had some type of technical assistance because they were already in the business of regulating all these small businesses and other businesses as well. And even back then, they needed some help. But this sort of codified that, hey, we need this nationally small business or some type of assistance rather than just as a state felt like it. It also encouraged to continue ongoing technical and consistent compliance assistance whenever possible, and whenever possible, to include all state agencies. So even then, though it was an air rule, they were already encouraging multimedia. So at any time, if your state saying no, you can only do air, you can sort of point to this original guidance in the formation of the SBEAPs, and it indicates you really should be multimedia. Now, we'll get into funding in a little bit later because that's always been an issue. But that's also one of the roadblocks to being multimedia. But in any case, back then the guys were still saying do multimedia as best you can. Try and be proactive as well as reactive to support small businesses. Reactive is our standard. Somebody calls us, we react to it. We try and help them with whatever their question is. Proactive would be like, here's a rule coming down the pike. We let people know about it so they can comment on it early on. They can try and become part of a small business advocacy review panel. Or they can send in their comments, or we send in comments on behalf of them to be proactive about how the rule is being developed. Because the really great thing about how EPA is and several other groups is they will publish a proposed rule. We have a chance, if we're up on our game, to look at it, read through it, and it's like, okay, this is something that can be complied with, so that's good. Or we can look at it and say, what are you doing? This is not something anybody can comply with. It will create a lot of hassle for a lot of people. Or we can look at it and say, why are you putting out this new rule? Because you already have this other rule that does the exact same thing and maybe even better. So it's really a two-way street. It is not simply a dictation, and that's great. And Paula and other contacts we have with EPA are really great about alerting us ahead of time for this option. So if you haven't been involved, this is a great opportunity. And also, this guidance can encourage flexibility from start and do not create a prescribed method of program formation, which is why we're all over the board. And this has actually been a bit of an issue with how we organize, but at the same time, it provides a huge level of different perspectives into the SBEAPs and how we go about doing what we do to help small businesses. So we, of course, had several really strong early leaders to get this going, and that's why we've lasted for 35 years and are still going fairly strong in many ways. One of the chief ones is Karen V. Brown. Many of you may have heard the name. Some of you on here are lucky enough to have actually met her. I unfortunately never got a chance to. She started with EPA back in 1981, so she predates the SBEAPs. And even predates the Office of the Small Business Ombudsman, which was established in 1982. Paula talked a little bit about where that came from, but 1982 is when it was made. She was named the Ombudsman in 85, and then 86, the Asbestos Ombudsman was added into it, so they sort of grouped them together. That's why it's now the Asbestos and Small Business Ombudsman Office. And then she was named the overall ombudsman for that in 88. And then over 12 years in that period, she became an advocate very strongly for small businesses. In 2006, we awarded our first leadership award. We'll talk about those a little bit later, and it bears her name as to honor her as her early development of our overall programs. Some of the articles she had, like she was profiled in Wall Street Journal as an outstanding model of government working well for the people. Entrepreneur Magazine described it as a friend. So up on our website, there are some links to this, usually in association with the award, which bears her name. But some of the quotes are, Miss Brown is someone who understands how heavy the impact of new government regulations can be on a fragile enterprise that often lives from hand to mouth. And that's very true. There are almost as many businesses that close as open in any one year. If we're getting ahead of the game, then we have more open than closed, but it's a constant turnover. And some of it is because of regulations, but helping them understand the regulations have a better chance of keeping their doors open, as well as being in compliance. Another thing, and this is something that Paula talked about, is how they're having an increase in calls. Well, some of this actually stems from Karen, because Carol Browner, the EPA administrator of the town, says the fact that calls to Miss Brown's office, being the ombudsman, increased fivefold while she held the post of ombudsman test to success, and said the service she performs is invaluable both for us and for the small business community. So even then, it's like there's a vast increase because word started getting out, like the government is actually there and can actually help you. They have designed us to help the businesses and community. And it also is a great assistance to the EPA and the state agencies. So even at that point, we are showing our impact. Okay. Some of the others, Dan Nicky. So yeah, I've been teasing that. Yeah, I've been around for a long time. I've been with SBEAP for 27 years at this point, but as far as I can tell, Dan may have the longest tenure at SBEAP. As best I can tell, he has been with the SBEAP for over 30 years at this point. We have several others who have been here for 20 years. Several of us are getting close to 30. Some of this, it's their second career path. This is actually my first and so far only career path is the SBEAP. But each group brings different perspectives, different experience. LaRonda, pictured here from California, was the one who helped create the first SBEAP. As best I can tell, they were the first ones to get an SBEAP out the door and in place. She also wrote or co-wrote various articles, including one that she co-wrote with Karen, called Success for the Environmental Council for the States, called Success in Our Own Backyards. And was quoted as, through their innovation, entrepreneurial approach to environmental education, wants every state, the District of Columbia, and the two territories at the time that had SBEAPs can be a success story right in their own backyard. I do know that the U.S. Virgin Islands had an SBEAP. They would Jasmine would occasionally come up to some of our annual trainings. And I think Puerto Rico had one as well. I don't know they are still in existence, unfortunately. Some other notable names: Annette Fulgenzi up in Illinois, hosted some of the first annual training up in Chicago. Rick Karleski in Iowa, Rudolph Cartier there in New Hampshire, and there are many, many, many others. I said I wasn't necessarily around for a lot of this early formation period, but I've heard Tony talk about Edith McKinney, and then there occasionally, if I managed to find where Linda Sadler, who was my original or became my supervisor, some of her pictures, like, these are people I don't know who are, but some of them, yeah, I do know. They're still around. So sorry if I missed some, but these are some of our key people that I was able to look up and find that are doing great. And of course, we have our stellar leaders such as Sarah, uh, currently over the education. She's also been the chair, Chris, Lynch and Nevada, Tony, Nancy Larson just retired. The list goes on and on. And of course, once we got formed and established, we had to get organized. Back in 1995 was that first report on the SBEAP by the ASBO to the U.S. Congress. That was a requirement. From my understanding, eventually Congress said, please don't send this report. But I'll get into that a little bit later. 95 is when the National Steering Committee was started because we just determined that, yeah, if we're out there, we need to organize and start talking to each other. And that really became one of the key things and a great way to communicate as organize and share knowledge. And then as it grew, we started organizing subcommittees. At one time, we still have the awards. It was a subcommittee. Now it's sort of pulled in underneath promotional. We had a guidelines subcommittee, a measurement subcommittee, multimedia, uh, even a climate change subcommittee. Some others that we've had that may not be around or recently we dropped our environmental justice subcommittee because of the changes in administration. Um, but anytime we find that there's a really necessary topic, it may become a work group, it may become a subcommittee. There are changes that go throughout time. So we do remain flexible that way. 2004 is when the awards began. 2 years later is when we had the first leadership award to Karen Brown. There actually is a full list up on our website of the different winners over the years, or at least most of them. And we started doing training as well. We decided like, hey, we need to get together face to face, share knowledge, really be focused on our training, especially as back then we didn't have all the great tools such as Zoom or Teams or anything to really do video conferencing. Back then, we literally had multi-party line type calls. And trying to get 60 people together on a phone line was a bit of a pain. So having annual training like that, where we met face to face, was really great. Here's an example of some of the sessions that I found on that very first annual training back in Chicago. This is up on our website. And then we even had a national cap back in 96. It unfortunately has sort of faded away. I'm not sure exactly when it did that, but we've been talking about getting something similar to that back together. It just hasn't occurred yet. Recurring issues. So I talked a little bit earlier about funding and multimedia. Back in 97, there was an average budget of about 145,000 for the entire program and 3 full-time people per program. It went up to 300,000 and 4 FTEs back in 2005. Currently, we may be down to about 2.7 or 7, depending on how you calculate it. There's a few states that have really, really big programs. In a few cases, we're not entirely positive all of them are actually with the SB, but they might be with like an overarching office. For example, if the SBEAP is housed in a P2 program and they're counting their entire P2 program. We have some questions about some of that, but that shows some of the struggles we have. Plus, there's that recurring thing of multimedia. We're required by the Clean Air Act, but only the Clean Air Act. So that's why most of us have at minimum an air component to our programs. But as stated in that guidance, they did encourage multimedia even back as far as 1992 at the initial formation of the SBEAPs. But if you can't convince your program, convince the other regulatory groups to do some type of funding, and air is the only one with an actual requirement to do funding, it sort of defaults to you being air at a minimum. And everything else is just added on based on what your state allows. So that's something to consider. Like if you can convince them that yes, we really were intended to be multimedia, maybe you can change the funding parameters around and start growing your footprint as well as your reach in multimedia. Because after all, that 1992 guidance encouraged us to essentially be a one-stop shop for small businesses, because majority of small businesses, if they have a specific question, sure, they'll call us, ask that specific question, we answer that specific question, we're done. But if they're a startup and they're like, what permits do I need? Now we're going to cover everything. And even that, we've also gotten support from other groups. For example, there's a letter from the Environmental Council of the states back in 2007 to EPA supporting comprehensive legislation, multimedia approach, and getting past any restrictions that we had and how we did our outreach. Some of the things they talked about was creating a proposed comprehensive small business environmental assistance legislative initiative. So potentially that could have meant that we might have been our own act rather than being an add-on that was lobbied by associations to a much, much larger act. That would have been great because it might have encouraged multimedia. Other things is encourage small business environmental regulatory requirements that span land, air, water, and waste, and presented complexity beyond the capabilities of many small operations. And we would have been that point of contact to assist them in all that. Now, we talked earlier about how some states already had some like a technical assistance. Perhaps they could combine those into one big office that becomes that one-stop shop to help all small businesses. That letter also indicated a need to get beyond restrictions for the small business environmental assistance and ombudsman programs and compliance advisory panels that limit actions to the development of air compliance assistance tools. So they talked about there are some roadblocks to developing tools to help small businesses and enable things to be easier for everybody. But at that point, there's a survey done in 2007 that indicated well over 90% of SBEAPs provide assistance beyond air. Yet air is the only one that's required to fund the SBEAP. Most states do get some funding from a general fund or some of the other things, but as far as the SBEAPs, air is the only one that's actually been required to fund us. So that's always been a little bit of a sticking point. Some of our impacts are the years. So back in 2021, there was a publication, 20 Years of Success in Helping Small Businesses. Some of the things they indicated is that there's a Kentucky study that indicated the benefit of the Kentucky SBEAP. So just in Kentucky alone, they indicated that their assistance was worth $3 million per year to the small businesses in Kentucky. Kenya Stump actually did her master's thesis while in the Kentucky SBEAP, and that had been used for a while trying to help determine better metrics. She was determining at least a 3-to-1 or higher ratio of benefit to cost for having the SBEAP. So for every dollar that's put into an SBEAP, small businesses reap $3 in benefits or deferred costs from either fines, consultant fees, or anything like that.
Okay.
Okay.
Also,
Vermont SBEAP at that time know that during the facility design phase, they're working with a particular, this is just one example, they were working on a particular facility, and they noted that, hey, that facility overlooked some stormwater requirements. And by catching that in the early stages, it saved that company thousands. Kansas in 2006 helped a business achieve a reduction of 90% of their hazardous air pollutants. So we're helping businesses be in compliance, go beyond that compliance, and save themselves money. Overall, as I said, with the Clean Air Act being estimated as one of the most influential and forward-thinking, it's had a benefit of approximately 40-1 in health ratios, health, community, and everything else by reducing air pollution. All right, so now we've been looking at the past some, let's look at the future here. And many of you are going to be the future of the SB. We're still going strong. There many businesses come to Wyoming and continue to spread the word. We're even starting to get some assistances like, hey, this business told me about you. They said you could help, and we help them. We continue to provide that direct one-on-one assistance to several 100,000 businesses per year, training to millions, and this is your foundation to build on. We call this newcomer training. I know there's a lot of you that may have been around for a while, but I am seeing a lot of new faces, and that's extremely encouraging because this is the foundation that we're trying to pass on to you, and the best way to become be that future is become more involved. Become involved in subcommittees. Consider taking on leadership roles, especially if you've had some experience elsewhere in a regulatory or even business area, or even if you're just brand new to an SB. Getting involved, you have your own unique perspective. You also have fresh knowledge. You also have tools that you know of that can be shared around. So don't ever say that, hey, I'm new here, I don't have nothing to contribute. It's because you're new here that you definitely have something to contribute. So with that, that's where we came from, where we've been, and where we're going. The SBEAP is a great organization in each individual state and as well as at a national level, because we get to be the good guys. We get to be the ones that help people. We get the ones that, and this is an actual quote from a client, is they called the government and it was easy. That's what we're here to make it for small businesses everywhere. It is unique in that we have a huge range of expertise. We will get questions about everything, and I do mean everything. Even last week or 2 weeks ago, I had a question about from a company wanting to put in a synthetic graphite facility for making synthetic graphite for nuclear reactors. We also get ones like, hey, I have an extra 40 acres. I want to put in a campground. What regulations do I need to know about? And some of them we more or less direct them like, okay, here's the Department of Health or here's the Department of Commerce. But whenever it's an environmental question, we're the point for that. And we're there to help small businesses with anything they have. And in Tennessee, we have our customer-focused government. So it's really become ingrained into us. Like if somebody calls us, we're going to help them. Even if it's not us who ends up ultimately helping them, we'll find the resources to get them to that person so they get the right answer. So with that, I'll wrap it up. And if there's any questions, please feel free to unmute, ask me anything. I may not know it, but that's standard. We're here to find out and share the knowledge.
Thank you, Donovan. Appreciate all that information. And I want to reiterate the opportunities for leadership within our groups between the chairs and vice chairs of the subcommittees, as well as serving as a representative for your region or your alternate for your region. Usually what happens is you're an alternate for a year or two, and then you move up to the regional rep and you get to hear more of what's going on in the nation and the states and the regions, and make decisions for strategy and commenting letters and what is needed and where we want to go. And a great opportunity to build your resume and to be with a really good group of people. It's fun to be on calls where people can disagree yet agree with what we want to, how the outcome want it to be. We just haven't quite figured out the way to get there. All right, so moving on with that. Yeah, go ahead, Donovan. Yes.
Actually, you remind me of something I said I was going to talk about, and I totally forgot to mention. So, yes, there are several opportunities for leadership. The representative, such as myself, a few others, they represent the regions, but we also need an alternative representative. This is usually the first point at which somebody starts getting into the larger group of the national area. They serve as a backup, but we need those people to be willing to step up so that we have a good rotation of leadership and get shared around the different states in a region. Many regions do not currently have an alternative representative. But stepping into that is your great opportunity to learn from somebody who might have been there for a while. And then you can be fully prepared to step into the representative role. Plus, it's again, it gives you a wider perspective, it gets you involved. And also the same with chairs and co-chairs. Each subcommittee we have now decided are going to have co-chairs. The reason for this is we may have some of our older groups, like say Sarah or Crystal to a degree, who may have been around for several years and they've been chair, but having a co-chair gives a chance for somebody who might not have had that experience to come in and learn from them and pick up as well as develop their own leadership skills. So there are plenty of opportunities to learn to be a leader at a national level. And this easily translates into, as Sarah said, great resume builders. It also hopefully gives you more confidence in your own state so that you can take on more and better roles for yourself and grow as both a leader as well as somebody in the SBEAP, as well as you grow your knowledge.
All right, thank you, Donovan. We are going to move on to our subcommittees, and he just mentioned her name, Crystal. Crystal, will you please give a little overview of the promotional committee?
Yeah. Oh, did I freeze? Okay, yeah, I froze for a second. Let me switch screens. Hey everyone, my name is Crystal Warren and I work with Donovan in Tennessee. I am the manager of the SBEAP of Tennessee's SBEAP program, and I also am over 2 subcommittees. So one is promotions and one is planning, and I'll cover that when we get there. So you can read this slide. This is what's posted on our website. The promotion subcommittee is intended to collaborate internally to share best marketing and best promotional practices to enhance our programs on both the individual and the state level. So, and the reason for that is because we, as you've heard for the past 2 hours, we offer such a great product. We are such a great service to our individual states, but not enough people know about us. At least that's the case in Tennessee, and I think it's the case in a lot of other states. So our group gets together on a quarterly basis and discusses ideas on how to internally promote our program within our states. And then there's also the perspective of the national level. Our goal is to advocate for our program on a national level. There's a lot of sister organizations out there that aren't aware of who we are or what we do. So we want to promote ourselves to them too, all with the goal of bringing awareness to the great work we do. And so that we can provide better customer service or provide service to more small businesses, because that's what we're all passionate about. So we meet quarterly, like I said, on the second Tuesday of that month. Our next meeting is August 12th. If you're interested in joining that meeting, please email me directly. My email's at the bottom, or put it in the chat, and I hope to see it. And I'll get you added to that listserv. Just I will go ahead and tell you, the people on the planning committee know there is a lot of user error between me and the listservs, but I'm trying to get them correct. But if you want to join, let me know. I'll put you on the list. Some of the other things that this group does is they host the NSC Awards program. So every year, and Donovan is in charge of this particular aspect of it, but every year there's different categories of awards that members of the National SBEAP submit nominations for these awards, and the promotions subcommittee votes on the nominations and then hands out the awards, typically at an annual training. So just so you know. The planning committee is also a member of the annual training committee, and our website is listed there on the slide. So I think that's all. If y'all have any questions, let me know. Oh, otherwise, I'll go right into the planning, but if you have any questions, still let me know. So this annual training subcommittee completely plans the entire annual training for our national SBEAP. In 2024, Tennessee hosted in Chattanooga, and Donovan referenced that a few times. And so we don't have no state is actually acting as the host this year. So I volunteered to chair that subcommittee again. But y'all should have received an email yesterday evening about our upcoming annual training. So I'll give a plug, and the pictures here, or I saved the dates here. Oh, those dates are wrong. So we changed since I submitted this this slide to Abby. So it's now Monday the 20th, Tuesday the 21st, Wednesday the 22nd, and optional on Thursday the 23rd. So y'all can look at the email to get the dates right, because they've changed so much. I'm not sure I have them right in my head. But it's in Salt Lake City, Utah. I think it'll be a great time. Super excited about it. But if you want to participate in this subcommittee, typically on a typical basis, this subcommittee meets monthly following the last annual training. So for example, our 2024 annual training was in March. So then took a break in April, but then we should have started meeting in May on a monthly basis. And then the few months before the training, we'll start meeting every 2 weeks, just because there's a lot of details to hash out right before the training. So currently we're meeting every 2 weeks. And if you're interested, please let me know. Again, my contact information is there, and there's a link to our website on the National SBEAP webpage.
All right, thank you, Crystal. Moving on to the NSC Education Subcommittee. As you can see, we also meet the fourth Tuesday of the month at 1 p.m. every other month. So we only have 6 meetings, and usually some of those meetings are actually webinars. One of our most recent webinars that is recorded and on the webpage is standard operating procedures, and how various states are implementing those and doing that to keep up with procedures. So when people leave or retire, or there's a change in leadership, you have that information to pass on to the next person. We are finding that so many of our people that participate in our groups, they retire, and then then that state stops participating because they were a one-person program and they didn't have a standard operating procedure that says, oh, by the way, as the SBEAP person in our state, we participate in the National Steering Committee and these subcommittees and these networking opportunities and these training opportunities. But if you don't write it down, no one knows that's what you're supposed to do. So very important, standard operating procedure. So go look at that webpage, that webinar. We also support the annual data collection survey and annual report. That should be coming out. The 2024 report should be coming out any day now. We just confirmed the proofreading of it, so that should be coming out soon. We had 38 states actually submit data for that. And as we're always finding, states define things differently. So we're always learning and growing of how to collect data, what type of data we should collect, and what kind of stories we can tell from that data. So hopefully you'll see a little changes in what we did this year compared to other years. We are also have a member on the planning committee that does for the annual training. That doesn't mean that it's the chair on that annual training. It can be anyone from that subcommittee. So it's another way to join a subcommittee, but with and have a leadership role, but not be inundated with a lot of homework and a lot of tasks. It's a way to provide input, to provide suggestions, and to learn what is going on in the rest of the programs. We have a webpage. Again, that's my contact information. And if you want to be added to the education subcommittee, we'd love to do that. We have a very strong group who work together quite well. I tell you, it's pretty exciting to have another group of people who are very committed to what they do and how we present ourselves. And it's just a really fascinating thing. I guess my last thing I would say, we created this group because we like to talk and we like to talk about who we are and how we're similar and how we're different. And then when we are similar, we go, oh, well, I can prove my program because now I've learned from you. Or how we're different. I'm like, well, goodness, I never thought about adding that. That's a great idea. And so it really helps you to change up your programs, to be better at what you do, to not be in a silo, and to be more open to new ideas and new strategies and staying innovative, because oh my goodness, there are things that go on that didn't exist when I started in this role 15 years ago. You know, PFAS was just nothing, and now it's everything. Painting. Oh, we have a coding guy on the call. I remember doing the NSBEAP 6H. It was all about heavy metals and paint. And let me tell you, there's not a lot of heavy metals in paint these days, and which is kind of awesome. So yeah, regulations change, products change, alternative technologies change, energy use changes, and we just all have to be on top of things. And here is a great way to do it, is to join those subcommittees to stay on it. And I guess that's it for me. And I'm going to now turn it over to Mark and technical.
Thank you, Sarah. That's a nice segue into what I'm going to talk about. So with that being said, it is important to understand similarities and differences, and whether that information is shared from one region of the US to another. You may have a great idea, and if I think it's a great idea, there may be other people in the US that thinks it's a good idea. And for me, that becomes a topic for technical. So typically we meet the third Tuesday of each month, starting at 2 p.m. Eastern Daylight Time or 1 p.m. Central Time. We typically convene for 60 minutes, but it's not a drop dead at 60 minutes, it's over. There's a few cases where we've gone early and a few cases where we've gone late. I like to think of technical as sharing ideas and getting to understand perspectives. And with that being said, we are in a transition right now. And actually, Lena had to kind of do a tutorial for Zoom, and I currently use Teams. So likely technical is going to be a Teams meeting for August, unless something changes. Otherwise, the Zoom meeting would be limited to 40 minutes. So if we could move to the next slide. As much as I would have loved to have included other examples, I know there is a limit on time and on things I could share. So I love it because we are a diverse group, and I love that Colorado volunteered their resources. Caitlin Urso, Jarrett Vigil, Jesse Walters, I think I got that right. And so I guess I have an affinity for data centers. So they had presented once before on that. I thought they could do the same thing. I had the privilege of attending the Chattanooga annual training. And I think I had a conversation with Lucy Cross, and I was soliciting ideas. And she said, well, what's going on in the world of waste tires? And that kind of led me to, I think it was Iowa, which led me to a waste tire association, which then led me to a tire inspector in Michigan. And that was a great, program. Then with Kansas State, Jacob Larson gave an awesome presentation. And also based on the annual training, I think I overheard Hillary talking. And I said, oh, really? And next to her, I think, was Caitlin DeVries with Michigan. And she said, oh, yeah, we have something similar. And I said, well, I think that would be a great program or training for our group. Would you be willing to do that? We had to make a few changes. And in the great state of Massachusetts, I'm not certain how I became aware of this, but Turi has been a great presenter in the past, and they shared their knowledge on this new technology itself. So if we can move to the last slide. So next month will be a presentation by Gary Jones, Printing United Alliance. I've had kind of a relationship with Gary since 1999, I think, when we were trying to do a multimedia outreach with the printing industry. And a lot has changed in the printing world itself. And Gary gave a presentation back, I think it was 2021. And so he's going to do another one, and that most likely will be via Teams. I'm likely to send this out, the invitation to the technical listserv, although I could be persuaded to send it to Maine if there was some belief that doing so would be a benefit. Otherwise, I will just invite the technical listserv, and I will invite one of my coworkers who will help me somehow manage the influx of people. I don't know if I will be able to simulate what Kansas State did. In fact, I will not be able to simulate what they did. They did an awesome job. Hopefully you won't fire me afterwards. With that being said, thank you.
Okay, as you see, we have another break. We'll plan to convene back at
In 15
4 o'clock
minutes.
or at the hour. Wherever it is in your time zone. And in the meantime, we again have a couple of icebreaker type questions. So let us know what you feel is the most iconic place in your state that you recommend visiting. So we came out there. Where do you recommend we go? What can't we miss?
Abby, did you stop recording for now?
Okay, is this better?
That's great.
Okay. So what I was saying is we'll cover the essential aspects of National SBEAP's website subcommittee, a bit about the grants and the services that we do, and one upcoming important change that we have for the website committee. So once again, touching the history, what Paula had mentioned, the EPA SBO's office had awarded the first 5-year grant to Kansas State University in August 2015, and following that, a second 5-year grant was awarded to KSU in August 2020. So we are currently at the end of the second 5 years in this grant cycle, which will end in a couple of days. So July 31st, that's the last date for the second grant cycle, 5-year grant cycle to end. So these funds were mainly invested towards developing the website, maintaining it, and also providing scholarship for annual training and among other key roles that we did. And our grand goals, like I said, is to facilitate the communications, and we do it through various channels. That's the listserv, we do regular meetings, and we also have the National SBEAP hotline, and also we have some of the subcommittee webinars that are hosted on the website. So now the major responsibility is to of course, to host the website resources and to manage the social media to ensure that, crucial information is accessible to all of you. So we also assist with the annual training and, included usually every year we have 2 in-person trainings. So that is it. And mainly the core purpose, like that is defined in our mission, is to serve, support, and strengthen the small business environmental assistance programs through virtual resources and collaboration. So to achieve this mission, what the subcommittee does is we meet 3 to 4 times in a year, and we also host periodic trainings via Zoom mostly, yes. And during the annual training, the website subcommittee actually facilitates the website, evaluation for the training evaluation. So it's an interactive feedback so that we can improve the resources. And similarly, after this training, we will be sending out an evaluation. And I would request everyone who had attended this training to please participate in it and let us know your feedback. So that would be great. And we also maintain, several website meeting records that you can go back and look at. So, and also if you want to join the listserv website or any other listserv, please let us know, and we'll be happy to help you. And of course, key people in our team, you can see Abigail Krause. She's the one who's doing all the beautiful graphics that we have on our website. And also she does a lot of website maintenance. And our subcommittee chairs are myself, Lena Devakar, and Donovan. And Donovan had mentioned that earlier. So yeah, next slide, please, Abby. Okay, so now I believe that you have already had a chance to visit the website, but here are 2 notable resources that I would like to point you towards. We know the main hub is our website, and we have if you go through the green panel, you can see the website subcommittee under the committee. It's a drop-down menu, and under the website subcommittee, you will find a page where you have the website tour, and it's recorded by Nancy Larson, who played a great role in the development of this current website. And so you can, she is efficiently describing how to navigate the website. And another resource that I would like you to go to is under the website, you can see under the new resources, and the SBEAP resources, you can see the Newcomer resources. That is another slide which the presentation which I would like you to watch. So those 2 sources, for sure, it would be great for a start. And next slide. Unfortunately, we also have an announcement, like what Paula said, that that there will be limited or no content maintenance after July 31st. And so this date also marks the expiration of our current 5-year grant cycle, like I said. And so there's no further notice that has been given. So you may, if you have any questions regarding that, you can contact Paula's office, or if you still want to be added to any listserv or anything, please let us know, and that we'd be happy to do that. And yeah, that's all I have for you. Over to Eleanor. Maybe she can talk to you about the next training. Yes, thank you. Anybody has any questions on website, please shoot an email. I hope I'll respond as soon as possible.
Did we get a slide from Eleanor, or is the one that Crystal? There it is. Thank you.
Sorry, guys, that's on my end.
Okay. All right, Eleanor.
And Ellen, I just put this slide together because I didn't have one, just with everything that I got from Crystal's email.
Eleanor was here. I see she is still on.
I can cover it if she's not.
Yeah, you already talked about it a little bit.
Okay, I can cover it. So as I mentioned earlier, we have our fall annual training in Utah. Those are the correct dates. Ignore that save the date earlier. That was before we finalized these dates. So Monday, just to give you all a little bit more detail, Monday is reserved for travel, and we do have a networking dinner planned, probably around 6 o'clock. Eleanor has lots of ideas, but we haven't selected a place yet. So we'll get that information to you. But otherwise, Monday's reserved for travel. Tuesday and Wednesday are both full day of sessions. I think they go from 8:30 to 4:45. So we're excited about those for both days, 8:30 to 4:45. And then Thursday is optional. The National Steering Committee will meet in the morning, but that's for NSC members only. Another option is a site visit to an air quality monitoring station that Eleanor has arranged. And if you're not in the NSC or you don't want to do the site visit, then you're welcome to go home anytime you want on Thursday. Both the NSC meeting and the site visit should end by noon. So if you can get a flight or drive home afterwards, that'll just help give you an idea of when the Thursday events should be over. The registration fee for this event, there is none. So yay. But because of that, we don't have any way to pay for food or to cover food. So therefore, all of our meals will be covered through every person's per diem. And what we plan to do is select a caterer that can provide a variety of options. And then for every person who has registered, we'll send them that catering menu. You can select what meal you want. And then we'll have that meal delivered to the annual training building. That'll just help. And then you'll pay that caterer through your per diem. So we're not doing an organized payment from a group payment. It'll be individual. That'll just help keep us on time for our annual training. I know in the past when we've gone out to lunch, it's hard to feed such a big group in an hour and a half. So we're just gonna do lunch there, have some kind of networking built in for meals. And then we've tried to come up with everything that you need right now to plan your travel or to fill out your travel authorization. But if there's any additional information you need, please reach out to us and we'll share that, whatever questions you have. We'll share answers to whatever questions you have.
Yeah, so this is Sarah, and I have maybe a question or a comment. in the past, I believe this is going to be at the regional offices at EPA.
No, this is at Utah State offices.
Oh, I thought it was going to be at the regional offices. Oh, okay, never mind then.
No, we currently don't have a lot of EPA interaction planned. I think Paula and her group are planning to come, but otherwise we've noticed from our regional training planning and other events that it's really hard to get EPA speakers right now. So we don't anticipate having a ton of interaction with EPA at this meeting.
Right. I was only asking because in the past when we had it at a region, EPA Region 5 in Chicago, we had to go through a lot of security, like, and so that was one of the reasons why we made sure we catered in, because you'll get delayed if everyone went out to lunch, then you have to go through security again. And so that's one of the reasons why we catered in, was because of security. And if they have security, hopefully don't bring anything in that could be a problem. Like I had a friend of mine travel with his Leatherman knife because that's his tool. You can't bring a Leatherman little, it's like a Swiss Army knife into a region EPA office.
Eleanor, you have your hand raised, so you might have more input to share.
One thing to consider is to make sure you have your ID. You will need to show ID, but that's the extent of what you'll need to sign in. So.
And just your regular driver's license, not necessarily a state ID.
Sure. Yeah. No, you don't need a state ID. Yeah.
Okay.
Just some type of ID. Probably more than a Costco ID too, but yeah.
It does have a photo though.
Yeah.
Any other questions?
All right. Thank you so much. Hope to see some of you in Utah if you can make it. Appreciate you everyone staying on. I thought that was great. Most people stayed on through it. Abby, we can end the recording. Thank you so much to Abby for all of her